Welcome to the Darnell and Cody show, where we talk about social, political, and philosophical issues currently relevant to us as a society. Today we're going to be talking about sanctuary cities. We're going to be talking about the origins of sanctuary cities, the U.S. political and social aspects of sanctuary cities, the moral standpoint, as well as the policies behind them. And we're also going to discuss whether or not they're actually helpful. So first of all, I'm going to go into the origins. Sanctuary cities originally were a concept that goes back thousands of years, started by many religions. Buddhism, Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity adopted it when it came into existence, as well as Islam. For various purposes, these sanctuary cities existed within each religion, mostly to protect refugees and perpetrators of certain crimes. The Torah specifically protects accidental manslaughter in certain cities. It says that 6 cities should be selected in order to protect such perpetrators of such a crime. And faith-based groups in the 1980s took charge in the U.S. by refusing to deport sanctuary seekers or refugee seekers from Central America during this great influx of refugees during that time period, where more than 250,000 people were killed in the collective countries trying to suppress communism at the time and failing. So many people felt a moral and religious obligation to accept refugees into their communities for these reasons. And that's where it basically started in America. So what do you have to say about the starting of sanctuary cities?
I don't think anybody really has something against the philosophical, ethical value of sanctuary cities. I think what the controversy really stems from is in the modern age. There's more conflict than back then, where the government arguably was more decentralized back then, and cities had more power. But in today's world, we operate as a nation, and it really needs to be asked how much power or how much autonomy these local governments have. Do they have the right to make these localized sanctuary cities that can affect other parts of the nation? And I think that's where we have to kind of separate the past idea of sanctuary cities with the modern idea of sanctuary cities in practice.
Right. And I will go ahead and jump into the current politics, because as you said, it's really about the issues going on today, not so much the origin. So many areas, including the entire state of California, have legislation to protect illegal immigrants. There are about 550 cities and counties in the United States that grant sanctuary, as it has been known to called, to immigrants. These sanctuary cities have become a political issue as of 2008, when a Republican by the name of Tom Crescendo ran on anti-immigration and attacked sanctuary cities when he was running for president as a nominee. It soon became a popular issue, with many arguing against it because of the claims of crimes increasing and economic troubles, basically protecting refugees so that we would have a population crisis potentially in certain areas. The list kind of goes on from there, but at the end of the day, the state does have the last word, and that is how the U.S. law is coded. So the states, for the most part, have their own way of doing things. Certain states have actually banned sanctuary cities altogether, such as Georgia, and other states have granted full protection, such as California. And many states just allow their local communities to decide how to handle the sanctuary issue on whether they want to protect illegal immigrants in the local area or not. Virginia, and, New Jersey, and Missouri have plenty of areas where there are sanctuary counties, not cities, and just kind of suburban or rural areas where they also protect immigrants there. So it is just it's a local issue in America for the most part, and that is how I feel it should remain. It seems as though in more recent years the federal government is trying to interfere or stick its nose into what is going on here. And at the end of the day, protecting our border is obviously a federal issue, but how to handle the people that are already inside of our border, as long as they're not doing any kinds of crime or illegal activity besides just being an illegal citizen, or not a citizen, a legal resident, should be left to the local area to figure out how to handle those people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm always in favor of giving local governments more power. The more local the power and the more decentralized the government becomes, I believe the stronger democracy will ultimately be. And in consequence, the people will actually get to live in the society they envision, or the closest thing possible to it. We often talk about states' rights, but I believe the city and county rights should also be in the conversation. Although to what extent they can be autonomous is precisely the question that arises from our current discussion. I can't say I'm necessarily in favor of sanctuary cities, but what I am in favor of is the democratic process that allows citizens of a city to band together and say, we'll let these immigrants stay here because that's what we want as a community. Problem is that if, as a consequence of this, a city that didn't want to be a sanctuary city or didn't opt in to become one may get an influx of illegal immigrants as a byproduct. It's kind of like if your neighbor is having a barbecue and his guests just wander over into your yard without permission. And now it might be a harmless event, but harmless or not, the question is if the whole situation is an acceptable one to begin with. And for some, it's not, and they're entitled to feel that way. So what we're facing here really is if a sanctuary city can take the responsibility of being a sanctuary city. It's one thing to have a barbecue in your own backyard. It's another when your guests start wandering around the neighborhood and into other people's backyards. And I feel like the liberals often fail to mention that crimes are in fact committed by illegal immigrants. And although it certainly isn't to the extent that President Trump would have you believe, it's not as if these immigrants are, illegal immigrants I should say, are angels with clipped wings or just harmless children. They're hungry, desperate people that are both capable and willing to break the law to get what they want, which is a life in this country. And I'm sympathetic to anyone that wants a better life, but we have to be realistic, and we have to have a realistic plan to get legal migration to happen in a more comprehensible way through reform, as opposed to what we're doing right now, which is just letting people in and we'll try to deal with it as they come. Right now, we're facing like an ironic situation where people want to protect illegal immigrants from the law. Let that sink in for a minute. So we're trying to protect illegal immigrants. We're trying to protect criminals from the law. Even if said illegal immigrants are felons with multiple violent crimes on record, some of these sanctuary cities will go out of their way to protect these people and have them stay in the United States and in their city. So this has happened with a man named Juan Francisco Lopez Sanchez. Was it's a famous case that happened. He had seven felony convictions and was deported 5 times. Still, San Francisco refused to detain him for the ICE officials to come and arrest him. Instead, they released him back into their community, and he ultimately ended up accidentally shooting and killing a woman. So it goes back to us recognizing that the immigration process is inadequate, but the extent these sanctuary cities go to prove a point or make a politically driven move, even at the risk of its citizens' well-being, should be a concern for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to have a better way of deciding, who gets into our country, and that's where reform is going to come in. We need to speed up the process, but as well, we need to do a better job of even with the actual refugees that we do let in that have, legal status to be inside America. We need to make sure these are people that we want, that respect our laws, they're going to abide by our laws, and, live seamlessly in our society. These are people that we should want, and we shouldn't want people that aren't willing to do that. So that is, again, where another step, basically for the federal government to step up its game and actually do something helpful. And this kind of leads me to our federal policy here, because as you said, you said San Francisco, I believe, kept this illegal immigrant, basically allowed him to walk around on the streets despite being a 7-time felon.
Right.
This
San
is
Francisco.
this is a clear overstep of where the sanctuary cities are, protecting people at the cost of other people. The whole purpose of a sanctuary city is to help people who need help and are worthy of help. It's not just to allow people to remain there just for a political statement. And if someone is committing heinous crimes, a 7-time felon obviously is committing heinous crimes, then they need to be removed from our country or put in jail if they are a citizen. and it's just not right for a sanctuary city to try and overstep its bounds, basically, and say the federal government has no grounds, even in this case, where there is a law that actually doesn't um, grant this man protections. It actually clearly states that anyone that is an aggressive felon should be deported or detained. And the Illegal Immigration Reform and Responsibility Act of 1996 says this explicitly, but it also allows for states to make an agreement with the federal government to have their local personnel be trained in immigration enforcement, and then subsequently they're allowed to enforce their own immigration laws or the federal immigration laws as well. So ICE and all the other federal agencies have no jurisdiction whatsoever once these local areas have agreement. And there's only 5 states that do have such an agreement. And one of them is, of course, California. The others are Arizona, Alabama, North Carolina, and I'm missing one. I'll get it in a second here. But the point is that these states are the only ones that basically have protections from federal rights, and they can allow ICE to basically not enter their state if they choose to, or that county. They can block ICE or any other federal government from taking someone who is an egregious felon. And usually they don't enforce this because, again, if someone is an egregious felon, they do want them removed. But obviously, the circumstance in which you said, which isn't a unique circumstance, there are plenty of, I don't know if it's like moral boasting or like just trying to prove a point that the system is broken. I'm not sure what the message is, but the fact of the matter is that people that are felons, that are doing crimes that are not just being here illegally, are doing things that are terrible for our society, and they should be removed from here. And sometimes they are not, due to these cities trying to basically like morally boast about it in a way. It's very strange.
Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunate. It's a lot of this climate that we find ourselves in is just moral posturing, trying to make the other side look bad as a sort of political game. And I truly think that Trump has had a lot of part into this, with the whole build a wall thing. And right now, we don't really have a way to a real solution other than to elect someone in power that has a clear vision in mind and that has clear reform in mind, because building a wall isn't the solution to this problem, and neither is sanctuary cities. We gotta have that realistic admission to ourselves to say that sanctuary cities aren't going to be the answer to illegal immigration, and it's arguably not even a good bandage to the problem. So we have to really look at the heart of the issue, which is that there's a mass influx of people wanting to come into this country. And we have to look into it and say, how many of these people can we realistically accept? And what about all the other people around the world? How many is something we talked about in our immigration debate? How much of the burden should Americans have to take? Do we really have the responsibility of all the tired and poor and the sick of the world? And I don't think that's the case. I mean, sure, what says in the Statue of Liberty is, romantic and heartwarming and all. It's idealistic, but we can't. The fact is, we can't take everyone into this country. There has to be a realistic number and a limit to what we can do. So we have to start thinking about that too. We can't just think about saying, well, let's open the borders and let whoever wants to come in come in. It's gonna be chaos, and it's already chaotic right now to a certain extent. So the wall is not an answer. The sanctuary cities aren't an answer. Letting everyone in open borders isn't an answer. So from here, we have to all gather around and have a sober discussion and say, look, what are our alternatives? And maybe I think Mexico and Canada maybe even should pitch a hand in taking care of all these refugees and immigrants seeking a better life, and it's just not. It's kind of unfair for Americans to take on this burden alone.
I totally agree. I think we'll have to kind of dive into the solution at the end of this to really get to the bottom of that in more depth. But before we move on from the federal policies, there was also back in 2007, the Republican House tried to pass a law cutting funding to sanctuaries, but the Senate didn't approve. And then again, with Trump being elected, Trump tried to cut funding with an executive order back in January 2017. But in April, that order was halted by a district judge and then permanently halted after being found unconstitutional. And the judges found that the order violated the separation of powers doctrine and deprived the sanctuary cities and counties of their 10th and 15th Amendment rights. And more recently, this was almost current events as of about a week ago. Trump foolishly tried to say that he was going to dump all the unlimited supply of illegal immigrants, as he put it, into sanctuary cities, basically targeting California in particular, and then to be a highly liberal area, as well as a sanctuary state, basically. So, and he could have done this in an incredibly productive way that actually forced them to politically have to take a certain amount of them. If he had done something like, say, you guys, if he could have tried to make them take the moral posturing standpoint and, say, well, if you guys are so great, then why don't you take a certain amount based on your population? But instead, he just kind of chose this really bizarre way of attacking his enemies. It seemed like he's not actually trying to get any policy done. And at the end of the day, it just totally wasn't helpful, and it didn't get any momentum at all. It's just totally a fairy tale scenario, basically, because of the way he went about this. So obviously, as you said, he's not the right man to do it. And there are certain people, we have our favorite candidate, Andrew Yang, who has certain situation or scenario where he basically wants to give the illegal immigrants that remain in our country, the Dreamers, as they're known to be called, the citizenship, and then also start hiring more and more federal judges that can decide who is actually applicable for refugee status, to try and cut down on the massive amounts of people that are coming to the border, sending people home that aren't genuine refugees, and accepting those that are, instead of just making hordes of people wait and wait, basically. So there are solutions that people are looking at, and unfortunately, they're just not really getting talked about. Obama did try to give the Dreamers citizenship back when he was running, but that wouldn't really have hit the nail on the head, because you need to attack this problem from all directions. You can't just give everyone citizenship and then the sanctuary cities won't be a problem or an issue anymore, because there's always going to be more people trying to sneak into our country. So you're going to have illegal people in here after that if you don't take care of the situation properly. So it is important to at least realize that it's being worked on, but hopefully we'll be able to figure out a compromise sooner than later in terms of the political standpoint, because right now both parties are kind of just button heads.
Right. And regarding what you said about Trump wanting to dump illegal immigrants on sanctuary cities, I think the victory for him is that no illegal immigrants get into the country, sanctuary city or otherwise. So for him, he's just playing this game where it's a game of chicken that he doesn't care if he wins or loses, because it's a win-win for him. He doesn't want any illegal immigrant to get into the country, period. It's a victory for him. He just wants nothing to happen. So this is just a game of him kind of increasing his brand as this guy that, has brash and, no bullshit kind of politics. And it's working for him so far. It's what got him elected. I feel like the solution here isn't going to come from him. His solution is, we've already seen it. It's one way. It's the border. It's to keep as many of them out as possible. Whereas we've seen what the other side wants, the liberals want, is to just open the borders and let everyone come in.
So last thing we're going to talk about, obviously we've talked about the solution, which is really the end of the day end goal for how to take care of sanctuary cities, but we can talk about whether or not sanctuaries are helping right now. And I'm going to be judging this on two merits because these are kind of the two merits that I hear a lot of people talking about. And so the studies are very, very clear that the crime rate either isn't affected at all or it actually declines from sanctuary city protections, just based on the local crime rate on a sanctuary city in comparison to the national average of a non-sanctuary city. So the crime rate thing has kind of been debunked. A lot of people have heard that already, but I just wanted to clarify that. It's also interesting that the fact that these refugees are protected against the federal law so that the law is ignored means that money actually can be saved not enforcing the federal law. So it ends up bringing a slight economic advantage, not only because of that, but that does help. And it turns out that there is a 2.3% less poverty rate on average in comparison to non-sanctuary cities, as well as 1.1% lower unemployment rate in sanctuary cities compared to non. And there's also a median $4,352 of higher income, as well as 4.9% more public assistance on average inside of sanctuary cities. So there's clear economic gains. It's not that big of a deal. It is a slight amount, though, and it's statistically noticeable that sanctuary cities do slightly better economically than non-sanctuary cities. And as I said, it might, or it is somewhat because they don't have to enforce laws, and this greatly affects areas depending on kind of where they're geographically located. But as for the other numbers, especially the median income, everyone could use $4,352 more dollars every year. So it's just something that's a little bit interesting. And so it doesn't really seem like the sanctuaries aren't helpful, at least from the way that the Republicans like to attack it. So at the end of the day, the crime rate and economy does fine, but it does still create an issue, and it's not the solution to the problem.
Right, and it's not illegal immigrants that are taking jobs away or taking your benefits away. It's really, we just have to be careful about how many people we can take into the system and how many people we can reasonably take care of. And I don't know what that threshold is. I'm not an expert on that subject, but I'm sure that threshold does exist. And just accepting all the immigrants, illegal immigrants that come here and saying that it's fine is going to just create a continuous stream, which it has in the past and is still doing to this day. We're kind of reaping the fruits of what we have done consistently, which is keep accepting these people in, give them, a place to live without any repercussions for breaking and entering. I'm sure we have some room or some space to work with. We can still accept a lot more immigrants than we have, but we also have to keep that realistic idea or notion at the back of our minds that we can't just keep taking illegal immigrants. Eventually it's going to get to a threshold where someone should be thinking, someone should be doing the math, and someone should be, coming up with a plan or coming up with some data that's saying that, okay, we can take this much without it affecting our society too much. And something that something like what Ben Shapiro often says is that he's worried about illegal immigrants because it kind of disrupts the social fabric or the cultural identity of a nation. So you have all these people that come in, don't speak English, don't know anything about American government, don't know anything about our cultural values, and then it gets kind of diluted. It dilutes the entire system, and then you have a nation with weak or diluted ideals that once were inherent in the foundation of the nation. So I think that's a very it's not something that's going to be impending doom, I would say, but it's something that is going to get become a bigger problem. You'll see the repercussions of that as more and more people come with different beliefs, and this is where multiculturalism gets so much attack from. Multiculturalism isn't just about different foods; it's about a different whole different wide of values, such as like women's rights. So if a bunch of Muslims from Saudi Arabia came to America, they'll have a culture shock from what American women are allowed to do here. And if enough of these people with this mindset comes here and become a real voice in this country, that's something to be concerned about. Not in that they have a voice, but in that they have a voice that's drastically different from our cultural values that we have. So these are real problems. These are real things to think about. And I agree on the economic point of view. I think all data seems to point that immigrants help the economy rather than put pressure on it. I'm sure there are unseen consequences in this. It's not so linear in that regard either. I'm sure there are some unforeseen costs economically that comes from illegal immigration. But on the whole, I feel like the net positives seem to favor illegal immigration. And in the cases that it negatively impacts the economy, I feel like that's because our system, our social services like welfare and healthcare are so corrupt and so inadequate as they are that those are separate issues rather than trying to loop that around into a problem with immigration. But anything more to add, Cody?
No, I mean, you summed it up pretty good at the end of there. I would just say that I agree with you that, the best way to enter our society is to be welcomed in it at the end of the day. And by welcomed, I mean to come in here legally, go through the process, receive the social security number and what have you. And if you have people that enter in through that way, then at least they learn the values of our society, and they'll understand what to expect more than someone who kind of just walks in or sneaks in however way they do. And it is a problem, and that's something that a lot of people, not just some, a lot of people don't really want to talk about, where people, as you said, do not value our culture's like morals, standings, and certain things like women's rights, as you said, or recently in America, we've legalized gay marriage, and a lot of people all over the world would find that abhorrent. So we have things that we respect and other people don't, and vice versa. So that is clearly something to look out for when you just allow people to enter into your society, especially if they haven't gone through legal means. That's just a problem waiting to happen potentially. But I think that is all the time we have for now, so we will thank you for joining us for this episode of Darnell and Cody, and we should probably have an episode pretty quickly up as well about Andrew Yang and another candidate, so hopefully you can join us there as well. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.